Okay, hi, I'm Melanie. I'm one of the Australian Youth Delegates.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Shaw and I'm one of the Australian Youth Representatives as well.
Alright, well I might start by just briefly explaining the Australian Youth Delegate program. It's a year-long program, and one of the things that makes it different from a lot of the other Youth Delegate programs is that we do a lot of work in our country as well. So we spent 5 months travelling all around Australia and going to all sorts of places, schools and universities and homeless shelters, very remote Aboriginal communities, meeting with a huge number of community organisations and politicians and things like that. So we actually do a lot of sort of local work and national work. And then we get to come to the UN towards the end of the year and spend 8 weeks here, which is the longest period of this year's group of youth delegates. So that's been really exciting. And I think one of the big things that young people can bring to the UN is that we tend to have the ability to speak a lot more frankly and a lot more honestly sometimes. And this was really demonstrated this year in the third committee when all the youth delegates gave their statements under agenda item 55, which was social development. And I think that, you know, unfortunately this year it's only been 17 countries that have sent youth delegates, but I think that if there were, say, 192 youth delegates filling up that entire agenda item, the kinds of things that they say actually have the potential to have an enormous impact in terms of sort of bringing ground realities into decision-making processes, and also bringing in perspectives that are outside ideology.
One of the things I really find unique and important about the Australian program is that we do that consultation tour of Australian young people, because one of the things we advocate for so strongly as youth representatives is the consultation, involvement and engagement with young people throughout levels of government and throughout the United Nations. And so we really need to be best practice models of that way of thinking ourselves. And so, having estimated that we spoke to about 5,000 people this year, we really find that we're not just two people representing Australia at the United Nations, we're thousands of young voices. So it's been an honour and a privilege to be able to bring that to the United Nations and to work within the Third Committee on Human Rights. So since we've been in New York, we've both delivered statements to the Third Committee under the social development item, and we were largely advocating on the need for young people to be involved in decision making and talking about the unique things that young people can bring to the fore in that respect. We also met with the Secretary General and told him what's important to young people in Australia, and are working within the Third Committee. And I think the length of our stay at 8 weeks with the Australian Mission in New York is quite fantastic, because we get to really delve down deeply into a lot of the issues and really follow issues, you know, from the start to the finish. And that means that our knowledge and understanding of the United Nations is quite comprehensive by the time that we finish. And so I think that, you know, we really see our role at the United Nations in New York is not just representing the voices of young Australians, which we do through the speech and the Secretary General meeting, but also being two young people here involved in decision making at the highest level. So that's been really exciting for us. And in terms of what young people can really do for the UN, I think that we've seen throughout history that young people have always blazed trails, no matter what time in history it's been, and played a really key role in things like the women's movement and civil rights and anti-war movements and peace rallies. And so I think the ability of young people to really fight to be involved in decision making and advocate strongly for the right thing is something that we've seen throughout history and we continue to see today. So by involving young people in decision making, I think that there's more of a democracy, and young people are really responsible for holding governments to account.
And just to add to that briefly, I'd probably emphasise the importance of, when governments do send youth delegates, it needs to also be a program that allows the youth delegates to speak very candidly, and that's something that we also very much appreciated about the role that we were given by the Australian government. We were able to say anything that we wanted. It wasn't edited, it wasn't, you know, anything like that. So I think that's also vital to allow that to happen.
And I think the United Nations needs to make sure that the role of their youth delegates is never tokenistic and ineffectual. I think the United Nations needs to work closely with missions around the world who send youth delegates and make sure that they're involved in important work and really able to advance the issues that are very important to young people. Otherwise, you know, it's an exercise and a complete waste of time. And I also think that the United Nations needs to be responsible for lobbying other member states to include youth delegates in their delegation. Youth delegates have really punched above their weight in terms of, the fact that there are only 16 countries that send youth representatives at the moment, and we make a lot of noise for a group that size, but we always need more people, and so that's one of our primary aims in terms of encouraging other countries to send youth delegates. As we travelled around Australia this year, one thing became abundantly clear was that young people aren't just the leaders of tomorrow, but are leading their communities today. The most important thing for governments and the United Nations to do, rather than just consult with us in a tokenistic way, is to find meaningful ways for us to engage with young people and to include us in decision making at the highest levels.
And as I've sat around negotiation tables over the last 6 weeks at the UN and in conference rooms, the one thing that I really feel is missing sometimes is the courage to question what's going on, to question the structures in which we're operating, to question the ideologies and the politics that's informing all the decisions we're making. And that's a universal trademark of young people that I think the UN could really benefit from, and probably the most important reason to start engaging a lot more young people in global decision-making practices.